production. It was the Soviet Union which explored and adopted national planning for the first time in the world. After a prolonged period of debate and discussion, the first Soviet plan commenced in 1928 for a period of 5 years. But the world outside was not fully aware of the modus operandi of development planning till the 1930s. It was the exodus, one of the East European economists, Britain and the United States in the 1920s and 1930s, that made the world aware as to what economic/national planning was all about. The whole lot of colonial world and the democracies of the time were fascinated by the idea of planning as an instrument of economic progress. The nationalist leaders with socialistic inclination of the erstwhile British colonies were more influenced by the idea of economic planning. The whole decade of the 1930s is a period in the Indian history when we see nationalists, capitalists, socialists, Democrats and academicians advocating for the need of economic planning in India at one point or the other. To independent India was thus destined to be a planned economy. The economic history of India is nothing but the history of planning. 3. Even if the so-called economic reforms started in 1991 to 92, all the humble suggestions regarding the contours of reforms were very much outlined by the Planning Commission by then. For once the reforms commenced, the think tank started outlining the major future direction for further plans. 5. Going through the history of planning in India is a highly educational trip in itself, for though the Planning Commission has been a political body that never hesitated in pointing out good economics time and again. Let us therefore look into the unfolding of the planning process in India. Background. By the decade of the 1930s, the idea of planning had already entered the domain of intellectual and political discussion in India. Many fresh proposals suggesting immediacy of planning in India were put forward, though the erstwhile British government remained almost immune to them. But these humble proposals of planning served their purpose once India became independent and decided to adopt a planned economy. The Visvesvaraya plan The credit of proposing the first blueprint of Indian planning is given to the popular civil engineer and the ex-Diwan of the Mysore state, M. Visvesvaraya. In his book, The Planned Economy of India, published in 1934, he outlined the broad contours of his plan proposal. 6. His ideas of state planning were an exercise in democratic capitalism similar to the USA, with emphasis on industrialization, a shift of labor from agricultural to industries, targeting to double the national income in 1 decade. Though there was no follow-up by the British government on this plan, it aroused an urge for national planning among the educated citizens of the country. The FICCI proposal In 1934, the serious need of national planning was recommended by the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FICCI, the leading organization of Indian capitalists. Its president N.R. Sarkar proclaimed that the days of undiluted laissez-faire were gone forever, and for a backward country like India, a comprehensive plan for economic development covering the whole gamut of economic activities was a necessity. Voicing the views of the capitalist class, he further called for a high-powered national planning commission to coordinate the whole process of planning so that the country could make the structural break with the past and achieve its full growth potential. 7. By the late 19th century, the economic thinking of the nationalists such as M.G. Rene and Dadabhai Naoroji was in favor of a dominant role of the state in the economy and doubted the prudence of the market mechanism. This thinking was further reinforced by the Keynesian ideas in the wake of the Great Depression, the New Deal in the USA, and the Soviet experiment in national planning. Thus, the Indian capitalist class were also influenced by these events, which were voiced in the FICCI articulation for planning, the Congress Plan. Though the Gandhians and some of the business and property representatives were opposed to commit the party to centralized state planning, including Mahatma Gandhi, it was on the initiative 9 of the include President Subhash C. Bose that the National Planning Committee (NPC) was set up in October 1938 under the chairmanship of J.L. Nehru to work out concrete programs for development encompassing all major areas of the economy. Basically, the NPC was set up in the Conference of the Ministers of Industries of the Congress-ruled states, though other states were also invited to participate, where M. Visvesvaraya, J.R.D. Tabit, G.D. Burla and Lawless Ram and many others including academicians, technocrats, provincial civil servants, trade unionists, socialists and communists, etc., were also invited. A 15-member NTC with 29 subcommittees and a total of 350 members produced 29 volumes of recommendations. 10. The work of the committee was interrupted when the Second World War broke out, and in the wake of the Quit India movement many of its members, including the chairman, were arrested, and between 1940 and 1945 the committee had only a nominal existence. Though the final report of the NTC could only be published in 1949, many developments related to planning took place during the interim government up to 1946. A series of valuable reports were published which brought together the constructive thinking done by the committee and the subcommittees and the materials collected in the course of their work. The importance of the NTC lies not so much in these reports as in the wide interest it created throughout the country for coordinated planning as the only means of bringing about a rapid increase in the standards of living, and its emphasis on the need for bringing fundamental changes in the social and economic structure. 11. Some of the important developments after the NTC was set up which prepared a foundation for coordinated planning in independent India are given below. I. Post-War Reconstruction Committee. Early in June 1941, the Government of India formed on popular demand a post-war reconstruction committee which was to consider various plans for the reconstruction of the economy. 12. I. Consultative Committee of Economists. A consultative committee of economists under the chairmanship of Ramaswamy Mudaliar was set up in 1941 as a think tank to advise the four post-war reconstruction committees for executing national plan for the country. Though the committee suggested many plans for different areas of the economy, they had negligible practical significance as these suggestions were imbued with academic biases. III Planning and Development Department. After all possible delays, it was in 1944 that the government created a Planning and Development Department under a separate member of the Viceroy's Executive Council for organizing and coordinating economic planning in the country. Ardeshir Bello, the controller of the Bombay Plan, was appointed as one of its acting members. More than 20 panels of experts were set up. The central departments and the governments of the provinces and Indian states were invited to prepare detailed plans for industrialization. 12. This department was abolished in 1946. The Advisory Planning Board. In October 1946, the Government of India appointed a committee called the Advisory Planning Board 13 to review the planning that had already been done by the British government, the work of the National Planning Committee, and other plans and proposals for planning, and to make recommendations regarding the future machinery of planning and also in regard to objectives and priorities. The board strongly recommended the creation of a single, compact, authoritative organization responsible directly to the cabinet which should devote its attention continuously to the whole field of development. 14. This was an emphatic advice for the creation of the National Planning Commission, similar to FICCIU of 1934, which will have autonomy and authoritative say on the process of development planning, working in tandem with the Union Cabinet and also influencing the developmental decisions of the states. This happened in 1950 with the setting up of the Planning Commission. The board, in its report of January 1947, emphatically expressed the opinion that the proper development of large-scale industries can only take place if political units, whether in the provinces or states, agree to work in accordance with a common plan. 15. This suggestion worked as a great influence on the planning process of independent India, as it always tried to give unifying nature to development planning. But this process also induced a serious tendency of centralization in the Indian planning, to which a number of states were to pose objections and straining the center-state relations, time and again. 16. However, the political leadership, right from the 1920s, was very conscious of the need for decentralized planning in the country.